just around the corner from where I lived. So as soon as I went off, I was on the scene pretty quickly, and I was on the chain gang lifting the rubble. 18-month-old baby in a prom was killed, and that kind of way set my mindset. If they can do this to us, I'm quite prepared to do the same to them. Just before I turned 15, I joined the Young Citizen Volunteer, which is a junior wing of UVF. I was 11 actually at this stage. I can remember standing and looking up Dover Street, watching these tracer bullets flying up a street, convinced that the IRA were coming down to kill us all.
Eddie, thank you very much for sitting down with me. I appreciate you taking the time. Can you do us a bit of a favor? We'll talk about your life over the decades and your prison time, time the UVF and everything. Can you give us an idea about where you grew up and what it was like? You were born there in 57.
I grew up in Lower Shankill. Pretty much lived in a 2 up, 2 down house. There was eventually there was 6, 3 sisters and 2 brothers. So there was 8 of us in a 2-bedroom house. So the conditions that I grew up would have been no different to people on the Falls Road. Pretty much the same kind of conditions. So I mean, it's whilst saying the conditions were the same, I don't think it has ever been a normal society in my experience. And I mean, well, what's the definition of a normal society in the first place? But there has always been sectarian tensions from just for as long as I can remember. I mean, way before the troubles started. If you were on a bus and the bus was driving past the chapel, the Catholics crossed themselves, and so if you didn't cross yourself, you were identified as a Protestant, and that could, depending on the age group, it could lead to fisticuffs. At the cinemas at the end of the night, where cinemas would have played the national anthem, the pros stood up for the national anthem, the Catholics didn't, and that would have led to then, depending on the numbers and depending on the age group, potential fisticuffs outside the cinema.
Things like, sorry, even things like saying Derry or Londonderry is another.
No, I mean, Derry, growing up for me, I always knew of them as the apprentice boys at Derry, so I never had a problem. Yeah, I never had a problem with calling it Derry. It's only been as a result of the conflict that people have adapted to the Londonderry title, and I mean, I thought Jerry Anderson coined it well, calling it Stroke City, because they're pronouncing it Derry Londonderry, the stroke in it. So I mean, effectively, that's how they would have how he ended up referring to it. But I mean, there was a fair amount of integration pre the troubles in the 60s. I mean, from McCann, a leading Sinn Féin councillor, would have come into my house at the weekends, chasing my older sister when a kid. But I mean, I can remember about 20 years back attending a conference where Fra was at it and he hadn't realised who I was. Jackie Redpath, who had organised the conference, had bantered saying I was wearing a yellow shirt to accommodate Fra. A bit of banter took place, but I got a hold of Fra later on. I says, Fra, you don't realise who I am. If I tell you my sister's name, you'll know. You'll know straight away. And he says, well, what's your sister's name? I says, Iona. And he says, look, I used to have my Celtic scarf going into your house. Where I actually ended up living on the corner of Dover Street on West. I lived in Westmoreland Street on the end house, which ran onto Dover Street. So I was pretty close to where it all erupted in Belfast.
I was going to ask you there, maybe for someone who's not so familiar with kind of Belfast geography, Shankill Road is obviously known for being very much a loyalist area. Can you give us an idea of where it is in relation to like the main Catholic areas? And when you were growing up, was it as Protestant dominant as it would be known through the 70s, 80s, 90s?
There would have been small amounts of Catholics that would have been living in some of the side streets. The Shankill and the Falls Road pretty much run parallel. Well, there are spokes coming from the town, the city centre. They pretty much run parallel for the fair length of the Shankill. I mean, the Falls runs then and the Springfield Road, so that, you know, and all of the streets that are parallel, they would run from one end they'd run from the Falls onto the Shankill, and across the Shankill, the streets would have run from the Shankill to the Crumlin Road. So those three arterial routes in and out of the city centre, and they intermingled to a degree. Some people did mix. I mean, a lot of the pubs in and around the Shankill area were owned by Catholics. A big majority of them would have been Catholic owned. And there's been a lot of mixing and interaction. The only times you would have had tensions would have been at the 12th. You'd have had tension and arguments. I mean, nothing major, but
Sorry, did you say around the 12th?
Yeah, the marching season.
Okay, around marching season. Yeah, you might I've quite a few I have a chunk of North American viewers. I'm over in America. Like you might briefly explain to us there kind of what marching season is and how it does stoke these tensions.
Well, the marching season starts usually around March through to August, and there's all sorts of different commemorations that the Loyal Orange Order, Apprentice Boys, and Black Preceptory all have throughout these periods. And the main 12th of July parade is a commemoration of the success of William III in the 1680 battle. So that's all. That's a big commemoration every year here. That's a major thing. The predominant Protestant community, the pre-60s, a lot of Catholics would have went and watched it and not been offended by it. But as a result of the Troubles, it's become seriously contentious. And pre the Troubles, there would have been tension in and around the bonfires on the 11th night, with people getting drunk and getting abusive. But it was never really bad. I mean, you still would have had Catholics come along it and having a drink. But after the Trouble erupted, it just came pretty much a contentious issue. And the way the parades, the culture of the parades, are that each year, it's listed that there's thousands of parades take place, but effectively each year the worshipful master of the lodge changes, and the banner for the particular lodge is moved to the new master's house. So they have to put in parade permissions for these to take place. So if you think of the amount of lodges and the amount of changes that are taking place, they all mount up. and they come across on paper, they look like there's a massive amount of parades taking place when effectively it's one barn and one lodge, moving the banner from the past master's house to the new master's house. But the main actual parade on the 12th, they all meet together and parade to a field where they predominantly they have talking sessions where it's all predominantly heavily religious, with political influence mixed in with it.
You mentioned there earlier about like just one example was passing on the bus when you pass Catholic church, people would bless themselves and you would then identify kind of who's Protestant, who's Catholic. Again, for people who might know, throughout most of the Troubles anyway, the population was around 1.4 to 1.6 million in the north, and the ratio of Catholic Protestant was about 60-40. Protestants being 60%. Did it feel like you were part of a majority, growing up with that kind of thing?
Well, you were constantly being told that we were the people, and I think a large proportion of people swallowed that. Technically, if you break down the different Protestant religions, such as a Presbyterian, Church of Ireland, Methodist, actually the Catholic population is the majority.
Okay, counting Catholic as one block, and then
Yeah.
Protestant as fair enough. I mean, I think for a lot of people though, the Protestant Catholic divide is more, in some ways, it's kind of more a proxy for being considering yourself part of Britain, or considering yourself Irish. Would I be right in saying all those Protestant groups would still be unionists though, even though they may be different sects of Protestantism?
Yeah, that'd be predominantly unionist. There would be the few of them that would be, well, I would say quite a number have no problem with declaring to have an Irish identity. You know, I mean, it's only the loudmouths that you hear saying, the Paisleys and DUP of this world, that would prefer to take the Ulster Scots label as opposed to identify with being Irish. And you've a tendency to have to argue a corner that the men that went and fought in the Somme were proud of their Irish identity. A large proportion of them were proud of their Irish identity, proud to be able to speak Irish. So, I mean, that's a lot of that has been lost to the Protestant community as a result of the conflict.
On the note of like being British, or considering yourself British or Irish, did you feel like the Brits of like England, Scotland, Wales would have considered you to be a fellow Brit? And sorry, I forgot to ask you, but I assume you considered yourself like a British person growing up.
Yeah, no question about it. Certainly would have been something that they were often highlighting. I mean, I think we have grown up with a siege mentality, in that Irish nationalists are trying to remove our British identity from us, and as a result of it, we exaggerate our Britishness and deny our Irishness, and the Northern Irish nationalists exaggerate their Irishness and deny their Britishness. I would say you as a Southerner would see that Northern Irish nationalists promote themselves and promote their Irish identity more so than Southern Irish.
Did you think, in my opinion, though, I haven't really even seen like survey data or anything, but I'd be willing to bet that if you stopped like the average person in England, will say, and asked them just quickly their name the people who make up British people. I think for most of them, if they'd even remember Northern Ireland, it would be an afterthought. They would say England, Scotland, Wales, and be, oh yeah, Northern Ireland. Did you feel as if they would have considered you to be like a fellow Brit, like a proper fellow Brit?
No, I don't. I mean, it's a constant issue with, and it can be a shock to Northern Protestants whenever they go across to England, and the English refer to them as paddies. They get deeply offended by it, and it becomes the first time it happens to them, it becomes a shock. Very nearly comes to blows, because they're that offended. So, I mean, I would be very much aware that they don't see us on a same level as British citizen as them.
Growing up in like your childhood and teens, what would have been your relationship like with the RUC? I do know that most Catholics, or maybe not most Catholics, but a good portion of the Catholic community would have seen the RUC as being like an oppressive force and a group who were very much working against them. Would it be the same with them? Did it feel like they were on your side in any way?
And where I grew up, we would have thought pretty similar. The RUC didn't treat us any different or any better than the people in the Falls. Any issues that nationalists have experienced can pretty much be pointed to similar experiences happening in working class areas like Shankill, Sandy Row, and East Belfast. The RUC would have treated them the same. I mean, I can remember coming home from Linfield matches, specifically for the riot, but we would stop at Unity Flats at the bottom of the Shankill, all Catholic nationalist housing flats, and we would stop there to sing the Queen, and the RUC would be pushing us to move us on, and our chant then was SSRUC. So I mean, we weren't enamored with the RUC. They treated us no different. I think if you ask a middle class unionist or Protestant, you'll get a different response. But effectively, the RUC didn't live in our areas. You know, I mean, they particularly after the Troubles kicked in, the RUC like practically had their own housing estates where they could live in, and not be exposed to either side.
So you're saying it was kind of more of a class issue. It didn't come across at all. Like I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, the RUC, I think the ratio most of the time was like 90-10 Protestant Catholic. Did that come across to you at all?
I think it was obvious that was an issue, and that because of how the Ulster Unionists managed the state. And I mean, they would have always, the RUC would have been always at those Orange Order parades. The RUC would have been dictating what took place. So that we never seen them as our police force. You know, we would have had a similar attitude towards the RUC that nationalists would, but I don't think that they would have seen it. The nationalists would have seen that, our opposition to them. I mean, there's all sorts of ironies in it. I mean, the first policeman shot dead in the Troubles was shot dead on the Shankill. And the riot that night was a riot because the B specials were being disbanded and guns were being taken off the RUC. So loyalists went out and rioted with the police and army. Consequently, Constable Arpol was shot dead.
The loyalists were in favor of the RUC being more heavily armed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why so? If you didn't feel like they're on your side.
Well, it would have been that would have been unionist, middle class politicians leading that. I mean, I would, in hindsight, looking back at the Orange Order, I would view the Orange Order as a controlling mechanism that middle class unionists used to control and manipulate working class and disadvantaged Protestants. That's in hindsight looking at that. growing up with it, you just loved the tradition. You loved the marching, the bands, and the attention that it all brought. And there was no question about it. There was a superiority element to it that it emitted, I think. But yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think that would have been the reason why I followed it. I mean, at about the age of 6 or 7, myself and a cousin followed a band up the Clifton Street Orange Hall, the 112th. And when we get up to the Orange Hall, a couple of orange men approached us with kids and said, "You want to carry a string of banner?" So we said yes. So um, we, they put a sash on us. We carried the string of banner to the field. For doing that, they paid us about £2. We were getting sandwiches, sweets, biscuits, tins of lemonade, things that your parents couldn't afford to give you. And this was, I want to be part of this. I want to do this as often as I can. So I mean, and that would have been how I would have been introduced to it, and it would have been that element of it that I was attracted to. I wouldn't have had a clue. When I did join the Junior Orange, and I discovered that it is a deeply religious organisation. You have to learn this Orange Catechism.
Did it feel growing up as if not that ye were like first class citizens or anything, but did it feel as if the Catholics were second class citizens in some way, or treated that way? Did it feel like you kind of had some sort of an advantage that Catholics would have felt you had?
I think that was something that it did give that level of there is an element of superiority, and there was some level of having some kind of superiority, but and the reality of it was, in the areas that we lived in, there was no difference. The superiority lay in the hands of middle class unionists.
Can you take me to a time in 1969? Troubles are kind of kicked off slash kicking off. You're 12 years old. I read in in this old Chicago Tribune article that you remember at the age of 12, the next day after a number of houses, I believe on the Falls Road, where people were not evicted, but kicked out of their homes and their homes burned out. Do you remember? Can you take me back to?
Yeah, I mean, I think crucially the civil rights protests that were taking place, and Paisley's opposition to them, drumming up tension against it, and then you had the Burnt Hollow bridge attack, and then the rioting up in Derry as a result of it. They've been rioting for 3 days in Derry. In Belfast, the tension you could taste, and the rumours were rife that they were going to start the nationalist community were going to start in Belfast to put more pressure on the police. And on I think it was the 13th of August, Conway Street is one of the streets that runs from the Falls to Shankill. At the bottom of Conway Street on the Falls Road end, there was a car showrooms that was petrol bombed and burned down. So on the 14th, most of the men from the Shankill gathered at the top end of Conway Street, expecting another incursion or some kind of trouble. There was a Hibernian period on the Falls that night, and it didn't attempt to go anywhere near Conway Street. Went on down past it, down Divis Street, and it then tried to come up Dover Street towards the Shankill. And there was a half dozen women and men and a few B specials that held them back until all the men came down. The tension had been that high that night. It was that night that Bombay Street was burned. So it was Herbie Roy was shot dead and Patrick McGravy, a 9-year-old, was shot dead in Davis Flats. I lived in the corner of Dover Street. I can remember standing. I was 11 actually at this stage. I can remember standing and looking up Dover Street, watching these tracer bullets flying up the street, convinced that the IRA were coming down to kill us all. And just, I mean, they just thought this was it. So it's, the next day,
I'm sorry, sorry to stop. Did you see? Were you there witnessing when the actual houses got burned out, or were you just?
no, I wouldn't have been allowed anywhere near any of those scenes. Because I was 11, I wouldn't have been allowed anywhere near it. In fact, because it was going on, my mother would have made sure that I was in the street, when in Westmoreland Street. Didn't want me out onto Dover Street. But I can remember standing at the corner watching the tracer bullets coming down. And following day, I, along with a lot of peers, the same age as me, were making petrol bombs, Molotov cocktails for the teenagers to use that the following night. But about that afternoon, I was standing, and the British Army came in and they marched down Dover Street with steel helmets and fixed bayonets. They were like an invasionary force. My ma pulled me in the ear, get you in out of the road ad. And they were fairly hostile towards the Protestants community when they seen Bombay Street, the state of Bombay Street. They were hostile towards the Protestants at the initial stages.
It's a lot gets made, rightfully so. A lot gets made of the fact that when those houses like the Bombay Street example, for example, were getting burnt down, big mobs gathering, that the RUC were nowhere to be found. I'm not sure if the British Army were there at that stage, but basically those Catholics whose houses got burnt out and them kicked out were on their own. Did it seem like that? Was there like a conspicuous absence of the RUCs?
It wasn't a question of the RUC, it was the B specials. And I mean, what I later found out in Longcash from an older UVF man was that those tracer bullets were bullets that were being fired by the B specials over the heads of the crowds to try and disperse them. They were firing them from adopted shoreline armored cars, and they were rotating them, shooting above people's heads, trying to disperse the crowd. But it had been getting anticipated over the 3-day riots in Derry, and it just erupted that night and just couldn't be handled. Once the car showroom was done, I think the Protestants of Shankill were just waiting for the first opportunity. As soon as it happened, they were just totally unrelenting.
Yeah, okay. So when you when you look back at like 12-year-old Eddie running around what was someone's home and it's now a burnt out shell. God, how well, first of all, how did it feel at the time? Did it feel like you were involved in something bad or victory? And how do you now view it looking back?
Well, at the time, I mean, I can remember there was one of the streets off Dover Street that just about every house had been emptied. The families had all left, and they left loads of their stuff in them. And the kids my age were going in through the houses and just wrecking everything. We would have just been totally destructive and just didn't mean it was ridiculous. I mean, looking back on it, it was, just, embarrassing to have been involved in it, I suppose.
Tragic too, I mean, you probably wouldn't have got the full context of it at that age, but like looking back on it, God, it's a terrible thing to have been involved in. Did it feel any bit like there was a victorious kind of feeling in the air that like among the Protestants that they kicked out some Catholics and it was a good thing?
There would have been an element of that, all right. It would have been in terms of they were going to start here to put pressure on the police in Derry, and we put paid to that. You know, we put a stop to it when in fact all she did was inflame it.
Did okay, so you were 12 at the time. I might fast forward 2 years. You were kind of a party to something unbelievably horrific when an IRA bomb killed a lot of innocent people, and you were one of the people who were digging out dead bodies from the rubble. Not the same scale as we see now happening over in Israel and Gaza, but a similar thing. Like it's not anything a 14-year-old boy, a 14-year-old boy's mind should have to come to terms with. You said you were pulling out like babies who were blown apart.
Yeah, I mean that was a Balmoral furniture showroom on the Shankill. It's just around the corner from where I lived. So as soon as I went off, I was on the scene pretty quickly, and I was on the chain gang lifting the rubble. The 18-month-old baby in a prom was killed. Another two or 3-year-old, I think the other child was. There was a Catholic killed in it. 2 adults were killed, and that kind of way set my mindset. If they can do this to us, I'm quite prepared to do the same to them. And that's the emotions of it. I mean, I can understand the emotions of the Israelis at the minute, you know, after Saturday. I mean, just some of the stuff that you're hearing. I mean, it isn't reaching the British media the way it is other media. You know, it's being filtered here. We're not getting up to hear all of it. And the truth is what's happening on both sides now. You know.
Do you remember like the evening, let's say like the evening you went home after digging through the rubble and seeing exploded bodies and stuff? Do you remember how you went home and kind of processed that, being like the young teen you were?
Just angry, wanting to retaliate, revenge. I mean, at that stage, I mean, I would have been starting to get involved with the Tartan gangs. And
you might explain them kind of briefly to us.
at that stage, around 1971, there was a gang of teenagers on the Shankill, and they named themselves a Shankill Young Tartan, ASYT. You'd have seen it spread over the walls, and it was an amalgamation of all different groups of boys, teenagers that hung about different corners. Everybody knocked about different corners, and at the weekends, went to discos, and coming from the Shankill, there's a disco just up above our down, Alliance, that we would have attended, and the Ulster Boot Boys from Highfield, all Protestants, and we would have fought each other at the disco. You know, the two gangs would have to, and there was a lot of infighting, and just particularly different elements of gangs. The Shankill Young Tartan, you had Agnes Street Tartan, Percy Street Tartan, Woodville Tartan, and they all would have came together as the likes of Linfield matches, Shankill Tartan. There was a number of rallies that took place, political rallies that took place, in which the tartan were used, and eventually a lot of us evolved from tartan into the the varying paramilitaries. You know.
When was it you officially joined the UVF? You were quite young, weren't you?
Aye, it's just before I turned 15, I joined the Young Citizen Volunteer, which is a junior wing of UVF.
So this is what, 72? About that?
73. No, I don't know, 70. Would have been the end of 72. Yeah.
So you join as a teenager. What are the first things? Do they throw you straight into training? Do they use you straight away? How did it go?
Well, the first meeting I attended, they asked for volunteers for operations, and I didn't put my hand up. I wasn't going to volunteer, and I hadn't had any training. And the guy who had invited me to join it asked me after the meeting why I hadn't volunteered for any operations, and I said, "Well, I expect to be trained first." And consequently, we did receive some training. Initially, you would have been involved in gathering intelligence.
As a teenager, you'd have had a more support kind of role, I suppose, like transporting guns away from scenes, or like you said, being a lookout and so on.
Yeah, there have been. Well, you graduated. I mean, you gradually get involved in different things. I mean, one of the crucial things that I found myself doing was procuring part-time police security officers' personal protection weapons.
Coming in, you were supplying guns for people who were.
No, we were part-time police, part-time police reserve, part-time prison officers, and part-time UDR. They would have had personal protection weapons at home, and I would have. We had a guy who was an insurance salesman, and he would have pretty much groomed the people, found out that they had a personal protection weapon, found out where they kept it. We would have went in the full knowledge of where it was, and with a gun, to take his gun, and we took out got quite a few personal protection weapons, and never considered for 1 minute that they would have thought I was an IRA man coming in to shoot them. Never thought for 1 minute that how dangerous what I was actually doing was. You know, I mean,
You're what age doing this? Like 15? Running
15.
Houses, doing essentially an armed robbery, yeah?
Yeah.
Wow, bloody hell. Okay, so these were all thefts, obviously. So you weren't working with them, but like through the course of your UVF time, a lot gets made of collusion with RUC and loyalists, or UDR and loyalists. Did you come across much of that?
No.
Really?
No. I mean, I know a few UVF men that have been shot dead for being spotted speaking to policemen. So I mean,
But I mean, there have been a good number of cases where RUC were passing information, and UDR were working hand in glove. You never came across anything?
I have no doubt that there were individuals within those organisations. I don't think that there would have been a structural collusion. I can't see it. I think you would have had individuals that have been sympathetic to specific paramilitaries, and what may have passed. They may not even been sympathetic to the organisation. They may have been friendly with a member of the organisation and provided them with information, potentially unwittingly. You know, some of them would have been members. Some of them would have been members of the Orange Order, as were paramilitaries, and things may have been discussed there. So not necessarily intentionally passing information.
So the likes of like John Weir now, who was doing a lot more than like passing a bit of information. He was very actively involved. Are you saying that the fellas like him were kind of what's the word? Just kind of a random lone wolf that there kind of wasn't much of it like.
I'm not aware of it. You know, I'm pretty sure that there were people in those areas that would have had connections with security force people and would have got information from them. Yeah, that be would kind of way make sense in that, and particularly in rural areas. But I mean,
Yeah, like a
John Weir's information, I think, is questionable from some of it. You know,
as
from what I've
in
been told.
the testimony he's given forward, yeah.
Yeah, some
So
of it's true, some of it's questionable. And that's what I've been told. Um,
what parts, just out of interest? I know he in like the late 90s he wrote like a big long affidavit where he kind of outlined the stuff. Do you know, like off the top of your head, what parts are said by your sources to be untrustworthy? Like what claims, like
I
what
can't
claims?
I can't remember, to be honest. I mean, I had a conversation in relation to it because I know there's another ex-prisoner who was very friendly with him in the Crumlin Road, and he was very fond of John Weir, and I think he would have accepted everything that John Weir has said. These other individuals are people that would have been um, in a similar position to John Weir, and they would be saying, "No, bit of a Walter Mitty about that." So
You never came across fellas like, I know the likes of Mark Haddock, just to name one. He was more in the 90s, but like the likes of him now, where you had fellas in the UVF who were also an RUC agent. Did you ever come across them?
yeah, I mean, it was obvious that he was an agent. Everybody knew that he was an agent. Um, I mean, his was a classic case of, yeah, when I came out of the case and got involved with a Progressive Unionist Party, we were going around meetings and with having meetings with UVF groups um, in order to encourage them to get involved in politics. And the there were people that were being told, you know, um, bring a stop to kneecapping, bring a stop to punishment beatings, and some of them in the audience were coming back with justifications for continuing with them, and you'd be looking at them and saying, "Who's your handler?" You know,
Really,
the,
that would have been indicative of someone being an
yeah,
agent. What
yeah.
why would an agent be more in favor of them continuing with these kind of, like you said, kneecapping, punishment, beating, so on? Why would an RUC officer be, or yeah, agent be more in favor?
They want to come across as being more militant. They want to be seen as more militant, so they can hide behind it. Um, it'll make it easier for them to carry on passing information on to security forces.
Interesting.
I
So,
mean, my view, the how the conflict ended, I think that all the organisations were so heavily infiltrated um, that they had to find a way to bring it all to an end. It was like a competition between MI5, the military intelligence, and the police intelligence special branch. Competition between them to who's going to bring this to an end. You know, we've got that many people.
although, to be fair, like when people talk about when people talk about like RUC, like an RUC agent in the UVF, it's generally the ones who were going around killing, and often maybe with the knowledge of their handlers and not doing anything about it. When you're talking about when you're talking about like security force agents in the IRA, it's generally killing like IRA men, like Scaptichis and the like. Did it feel that way to you?
I'm pretty sure that they would have had a similar level of infiltration in all paramilitary organizations.
So when you were
I also think that they had identified the hawks and the organizations that wouldn't go along on a ceasefire, and they used a different organization to take them out before the ceasefires were called.
so hold on.
I'm thinking in terms of Laurie Morley in Ardoyne. He was taken out by UVF. Trevor King in the UVF, he was taken out by NLA. I think they were people that would have been opposed to ceasefires and peace processes, and they were eliminated. And I think the people that are eliminated
under the order of a security force handler, like,
yeah, I think that's right. So it would be interesting to go through an investigation of those things around those periods.
it'd be
Island.
God above. I mean, do you as in like an Operation Canova, but for in the UVF, like?
No, I think they have something there. Talking to don't know if you've came across a WordPress blog called Balaclava Street.
No. What's the claim they make?
Hmm?
What's the claim they make regarding what
Well, no, he's had access to quite a few UVF men in order to write a book on the UVF, and they've all the whole organisation practically has cooperated with him, and he has got information that the security forces don't have, and he has been approached by somebody, a subset of that operation you just mentioned, or that investigation, who are looking into Dublin bombings and information in relation to that.
Speaking of John Weir, yeah.
Well, I don't think he had anything to do with it.
Genuinely, you don't think John Weir would have had anything to do with that? What about Robert Nairic? I don't know if you have any more knowledge than I would, but do you think there's anything to that, to Nairic being involved in them?
No, definitely not.
Really? Why'd you say definitely?
The information that Balaclava Street's got for his book, I introduced him to the people that provided him with the information. So the devices were made in Belfast by key bomb makers in Belfast. Cars are from Belfast.
They were driven from that farmhouse. I can't remember exactly who owned it, but there was a farmhouse used by the group known as the Glennon Gang, and it's alleged, if it's proven that both of the cars came from them, the one that went to Monaghan and the one that went to Dublin.
Quite possible that's the case. I'm talking from the people who were involved in making the devices.
Interesting. Okay. This person you said is writing a book. This isn't a book that's already been published, no?
No, he hasn't. He hasn't finished it yet. But he's getting some information that's not in the public domain.
So sorry, just bring us back there a little bit. You said, okay, when you were like properly active, obviously not after when you came out of prison and went more into politics, but when you're properly active, did you then come across any of these kind of Mark Haddock, Brian Nelson types who were agents within your ranks?
I can't say that I did come across it. There were suspicions of one um, one guy who was under question in relation to two YCVs had been arrested, and it said that the driver involved in the thing that they were arrested for had put their names in the hat for what they were arrested for. So he came under suspicion. But I would have been involved in investigating them, and I thought there was no evidence of him.
Did the UVF have like an internal security unit, much like the IRA's Notting Squad?
Yeah, had a internal discipline. Provost Marshal was a key person that would have looked at internal discipline and.
Could you put a rough number on the amount they killed? I know with the Notting Squad that you can put you can put a number on it. It may not be entirely accurate because a lot of it, there's a lot of murders that might have been done with them that actually someone else. But would you know approximately how many murders responsible?
I wouldn't know the numbers. I could think of three off the top of my head, but there's probably more. It's three UVF men that I know that were killed by the UVF. So it would have been the provost marshal that would have pronounced those sentences. You know.
Very good. Okay, we'll get back to.
And that would have been for the Shankill Road Battalion. Each battalion would have had their own provost marshal. So
these three are these all like I'm not asking you to give me their names or anything, but if I was to Google all of their names, would it be known that they were killed by the UVF, or is it thought that they killed by someone else or died another way?
Certainly known within UVF circles that they were killed by the UVF. Externally, I'm not sure. I mean, I attended an event, ex-prisoners get together, where a lot of old pictures were put on a slideshow and put through. And on that slideshow was one of these prisoners that had been, or an ex-prisoner, but it was one of these ones that was shot dead by UVF. And I said, oh, somebody's made a mistake here. So there are dilemmas whenever it comes to commemorating some people that have been killed. Some people want to commemorate some that have been killed by the UVF, and some want to deny them.
Was it ever suspected that there was like a UVF steak knife, where there was an agent who was going around falsely labeling people informants, and even in some cases killing other informants in order to protect himself? Was there like a UVF steak?
Nobody. I've never ever heard anybody talking openly about it, but there would be suspicions on some people. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so we'll get back to your own story there. Those who would have maybe done a bit of reading about you would know that when you were 16, you planted a bomb that in a pub. It ended up killing an innocent lady. You might, if you could you talk us through the build up to that, to this huge event in your life?